Building healthy communities is a goal we can all agree on, and the Rape Recovery Center believes that we all play a part in reaching that goal, including the elimination of sexual violence. Here are some facts. Utah ranks 9th in the nation for reported acts of sexual violence, which costs the state $5 billion in direct and indirect costs.
Some people still have a hard time accepting the fact that we live in a rape culture. That's a very harsh term, and I understand why it's difficult to accept that. But over 95% of people who perpetrate sexual violence or rape will not face any consequence for their behavior. That's rape culture. The statistics bear out we actually experience sexual violence at a higher rate than the national average. And over 50% of cases of sexual violence occur during the daytime, not at night. And people don't always understand that. They think, as long as I'm doing things right, I'll be safe.
Our social media would tell you that every relationship is universally happy at all times, when none of that is true.
Now, here are some of the defining reasons of what sexual violence really means or can look like.
The truth is, I've never actually interacted with a woman who hasn't experienced sexual harassment.
We run surveys every year in the schools, and we got new data on teen dating violence. And it was frustrating to me because these statistics are no different than 2 years ago. They might be a little better, they might be a little worse, but they're in general the same because we're not dealing with this. We just deal with it every 2 years when we get this data. And that is massively frustrating because violence is not shocking. We see this all the time. And what we actually don't do is address it in any real way.
The problem with sexual violence isn't that the person didn't know what their boundaries was. It's that somebody violated their boundaries.
Sexual violence is ever-changing. It's finding new ways it can happen. I am the tech generation. We see catcalling over the internet, and it brings the same mental harm that it would in person. It still is endangering, and it brings up problems that we would see in person as well.
One of the problems with believing that the risk of perpetration only comes from strangers in a dark alley is that we think as long as we don't go in a dark alley, we're fine. But then we're ignoring the fact that it's happening to the people we know. Not only that, as a matter of fact, perpetration, the vast majority of the time occurs at the residence of the victim, the perpetrator, or someone they know. So it's not happening on the streets.
It's really important to support folks who have experienced this violence.
We keep throwing out stats and numbers, but those don't matter. The cost is not a number on a piece of paper, right? It's human impact. We think it doesn't happen that much, but without fail, every time I give a workshop or a class in a middle school or a high school, 1 or 2 students will linger behind, act like they're tying their shoelaces so that everyone will clear the room. And when everyone's gone, they'll look around and they'll come up to me and disclose their experience of sexual violence. And that's not a number. That's a person. And I think we can all agree that should not happen. And why is it that this stranger who they've heard talk for an hour is the first person they feel they can talk to about this? We can do better. I know we can.
Here's why understanding consent is so important.
There's such a thing as body consent, but there is such a thing as verbal consent, and that's the most sure, yes means yes, no means no.
If all of us nationwide were asking that question, how do I obtain consent? And how do I talk to my partner or partners about how I obtain consent? I just think that one step alone could create a huge shift in this dynamic.
We understand now that unconsensual acts of sexual violence happen more frequently than we realize.
Consent is important. It's almost paramount in everything that we need to do when it comes to healthy relationships and sexual relationships among all of us as people.
It's time to understand that this isn't just about women. It affects children, boys, girls, young adults, men, women, and even the elderly.
Women are often the ones we talk about mostly, but we're seeing more and more men come forward, which is reassuring. That they are understanding that we are here to help them as well.
I wish more men understood the potential consequences of inaction and the costs of inaction and lack of involvement to the people they cared about. I wish more men understood the profound impact action would have on themselves and the community and our society at large.
So, what does real prevention mean or look like? It's not just taking a defense class or carrying mace. What's truly needed for prevention?
Prevention is about trying to prevent violence from occurring in the first place, but how we deal with the aftermath and the impact is part of that prevention effort as well. Because when we empower survivors and victims and when we hold perpetrators accountable, we're sending a message out to society that this is not acceptable here. We're not okay with this. And that in turn starts feeding more of those prevention efforts of this is not okay.
If I said I was going to do a presentation on sexual violence, 40 women would pile into the room and ask how not to get sexually assaulted. That's not prevention. That's not to say it's not an important component of intervention and risk reduction, but what would really be prevention was 40 men piling into a room and talking about sexually aggressive behavior and sexist language and bystander intervention.
When you have those feelings, trust your gut. Call a crisis line. There's a number of different lines within even Utah that you can call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to talk with someone and have those conversations.
What I would encourage medical professionals is to become familiar with the resources we have here in the Valley, so that when patients do present and report either sexual violence, domestic violence, any type of violence that they feel unsafe in their current situation, that we know how to help them. All the costs of the resources here in the Valley, whether that be through the Rape Recovery Center or the Family Justice Center, are all available at no cost to patients of sexual and intimate partner violence.
What are the next steps? What's the future?
I just wish we were kinder to each other and understood each other a little bit better. And I think that the nice thing about where we're going with our conversations on healthy masculinity is that we provide opportunities for us to actually guide and have those conversations. And shifting that dialogue and helping people to understand how this is a human issue, this is all of our issue, can both impact opportunities and resources for intervention and more importantly, in my opinion, create opportunities for true prevention.
The most important thing is for our youth to continuously be receiving that message about being kinder and being empathetic and understanding other people's boundaries and values.
As long as we are focusing not just on individual perpetrators and individual victims, I could absolutely see an end and an elimination to sexual violence.
Let's help ourselves, not hurt ourselves, and let's take ownership of where we can, as individuals, be a part of this greater fight that we have to change our culture and our society in healthy and positive ways.
We need the help of parents, educators, professionals, businesses, faith leaders, and all the members of a community. If we can each better understand our roles in creating the community that stops sexual violence and not just silences it, we can create a community that is healthy and safe for us and future generations. And this extends beyond just sexual violence. Addressing contributing factors of that can also stop bullying, domestic violence, and suicide. If you would like to learn more about how you or your organization can be a part of ending sexual violence, please contact the Rape Recovery Center at 801-467-7282 or visit our website at raperecoverycenter.org.